Richard Crouse.
There have been creature features, as there were, since the inception of films. And what we're doing now with things like Dinoshark and Sharktopus and so forth, we're going farther and farther, and it intrigues the audience. I don't want to use the word outlandish, but maybe you can do that. Certainly the farthest out type of creature that's been seen.
And where do the ideas come from? I know that in Dinoshark, there's a great line, it hasn't eaten in 150 million years, and it's hungry. And I wonder, do those lines come first, and then you think, how can we build a creature to fit around that line, or do the creatures come first, or how does it work?
The creature comes first. The creature comes first, and what comes next is to try to figure out why the creature exists. That's why on the very first picture I made of this group was Dinoshark, which I just made independently and sold it to the Sci-Fi Channel, and it got a very big rating. So I then went for Super Gator and Dinoshark, and then the Sci-Fi Channel called me and said, Roger, you've come up with all the titles. We've come up with a title, Sharktopus. Do you want to make it? And I said, no. And they said, why not? And I gave them my theory, which I still believe in, but now with some modification, which is that you can go up to a certain level of insanity with these titles, and the audience is with you because they want to see it. But if you go over a level, what I might call the acceptable level of insanity, the audience says, oh, you got to be kidding. They turn against you, and they don't want to see it. And I said to Sci-Fi, I think Sharktopus goes over the acceptable level of insanity. But one thing led to another, and I said, okay, I'll make the film. Then to my great surprise, I got this giant rating, which shows that I have to up the level of acceptable insanity.
What would be next? I mean, can you give us a hint on what will happen when you up the level of insanity?
Well, I don't know if this ups the level, but it maintains the level. We just finished shooting Piranhaconda, and that's the next one up.
I hadn't heard about that. That's excellent. I can't wait to see that. Now, Sci-Fi really seems to get these movies. The audiences obviously are really getting them. Do you feel that there's kind of a renaissance of the creature feature happening right now? I know that, in years ago, 40 years ago, you were making movies that were somewhere along these lines.
Yes.
Do you think that this is a renaissance of it, or do you think that it never went away?
I think it's cyclical. You make a certain type of picture. It's successful. Other people make the type of film. You may remake or continue with that cycle. Then the audience is saturated with them, and the audience grows tired, and the cycle turns down. It never goes quite away, but people aren't so much interested. But then after a few years, well, somebody will make a good one with a slightly different point of view, and the cycle will start all over again, and it will build up. I think we're somewhere near the peak of that cycle now, and I've discussed this actually with Sci-Fi. They do not agree with my theory, incidentally. And my theory is that this can run another year or so, but that the cycle will start to turn back down.
Right, and then you will move along and look for the next trend?
Yes, move into something else, and then eventually this cycle will start again. It's always a little bit different than the previous cycle. The basic themes are there.
Now, what is it that makes you so adept at identifying these cycles? I mean, this has been for your entire career. It always seems to me that you're a step ahead of what people want to see.
Well, at one time, I felt it was because I was probably the youngest or one of the youngest producer-directors in Hollywood. The audience was young, and I felt what I was interested in was what they were interested in, and I could identify their thinking. Now, however, I'm one of the oldest producers in Hollywood, Hollywood, and I can no longer say I identify that much with the young people. But I can still draw back on my experience and see what types of films have been successful in the past and which of those types has not been made recently, or not been made to any great extent. There's always going to be one or two every year of every conceivable type, more or less. And then I think, how can I bring that back? Because I know it was successful before. There haven't been any for a while, but I must find a new way to treat it.
Right. What keeps you passionate about making movies? You say you're one of the oldest producers in Hollywood. You've certainly probably produced as many films, or you're more, probably way more films than almost anybody else who's currently working. What is it that keeps you passionate about going back to the well?
I simply love the process of making films. It is creative, it's interesting, it's fascinating, and occasionally it can be lucrative, and I like the combination of all of those things. I never intend to retire.
Right. In producing, will you direct as well?
Probably not. I stopped directing a number of years ago. I just felt the years had caught up with me. It was better to work with young directors and be simply a producer.
Right. Now, Sci-Fi, who you're making these films for, we don't get Sci-Fi in Canada, where I'm calling you from, but we certainly have the DVDs, so we can see Sharktopus and Dinoshark. It's interesting, though, that 48% of their audience is women.
That surprised me, too, when I was told it, because I've always assumed science fiction and horror, or any combination thereof, is primarily men and primarily boys and young men.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think, though, that there's something kind of specific about these movies? And, I think that they have kind of outrageous central creatures. I'm reading something here that you said that there's kind of a Freudian interpretation of the psychology, where you say a monster coming out of the water is not unlike a baby coming out of the womb, and perhaps that has something to do with it. Have you rethought that, or do you have any more comment on that?
No, I still believe that. I have different variations of it, but I do think that the mind works just to a small extent on the surface of the conscious mind, which we all know. It's primarily unconscious, and I think that these pictures do appeal to unconscious drives, and we found ways in which, particularly recently, you'll find the woman's role is much stronger than it was on the same pictures we were making 40 and 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I just saw a film called Machete Maidens Unleashed, which is a documentary about the films like The Big Birdcage and things that were shot in the Philippines. And those had very strong female characters in them as well. I think it used maybe a different way, but certainly this isn't something new for you. Yes.
That was fairly new at the time. As a matter of fact, I remember there was a female critic who, I've forgotten where she was from, I think from Boston, who actually wrote me a letter saying that she had been given the assignment of criticizing these films for the exploitation of women, and when she saw them, she said they do exploit women, but they also empower women, and she wanted to compliment me on that basis.
And finally, we're almost out of time here. I just wanted to say, so many of your movies have been remade. Piranha, most recently, I guess. How do you feel about the movies being remade? Is it a tribute to you, or would you rather be remaking them yourself, or how do you feel about it?
Some of them I remake myself. Some of them I simply license other people to. I think it is a tribute. The main thing, though, is to approach the picture differently when you remake it. You don't want to go back and make exactly the same picture. You want to rethink the elements and add new elements, or, as it were, reconfigure the existing elements. As a matter of fact, I have a meeting tomorrow to participate in a possible remake of Little Shop of Horrors, one of my earlier films.
Richard Crouse.